Good afternoon. Welcome to IPC Masterclass Season 3, Session 3. And we have today Dr. Shanta Datta. She is the Director of ICMR and National Institute of Enteric Disease, Cholera and Enteric Disease. Sometime back, I saw a Twitter post from a governor of a state, and I was surprised to see that that Twitter mentioned the video of Dr. Shanta Datta, and we are very privileged to have today her as a speaker for this session 3. Dr. Ranga Reddy will, the President of Infection Control Academy of India, will chair the session. Before we starting, I think very quickly, many of you are asking for the certificate. I make a point right now is that certificate will be given to the next week. So make the point to attend next week, same day, same time. And the slides of today's session will be quickly shared to you today itself towards the end of the session. That's the two announcement. With this quick announcement, I invite Dr. Ranga Reddy, the President of Infection Control Academy of India, to start the session, please.
Very good evening, colleagues. A very warm welcome once again to IPC Masterclass Season 3 and Lecture 3. Today, we are going to talk about occupational safety in pandemics, experience sharing, especially with a focus on laboratories where we are working. For those of you who have started attending for the first time, let me actually quickly give you a glimpse of the purpose and why we have actually started this experience sharing series with a focus on occupational safety for healthcare workers. As we all know, we as healthcare workers have faced a wide range of hazards during our job, including sharp injuries, harmful exposure to the chemicals, and adding to all of that, during the pandemics we get very high exposure to the infectious agents, right? In order to ensure that we are going to have a very safe environment for us and also for our fellow workers and for our patients, we definitely need to ensure that proper precautions are taken. And when the world over, actually this is a problem around the world. About 59 million workers are in healthcare. They get exposed to a complex variety of health and safety hazards. In this series, especially, we are going to focus on risk of contact with infectious agents, so that we can go through this pandemic unscathed and ensure that our exposure to workplace hazards, especially to biological hazards, are reduced to the minimum, and we remain safe. So without much ado, let me very quickly summarize my introduction to this particular series by just saying that the main objective of this series is to bridge the gap of knowledge and also the experience, and humbly contribute to reducing the infections to the pandemic variants. As mentioned, that this series is going to be consisting of 4 webinars. 2 already you have participated. One by Dr. Dhruv Mamtora. He talked about the hospital-based inward settings and ICU settings, especially in regard to a private hospital acute settings. And then in the second lecture, we had the privilege of Dr. Vijay Lakshmi Nag delivering her experience of staff exposure in government settings, which was a fabulous lecture. We could get a lot of insights and practical tips which we can implement in our daily life. And now today I am equally enthused and eagerly looking forward to Dr. Shanta Datta's lecture on COVID laboratory, which is going to definitely give us insights and the tips in order to make our work within the laboratory settings as safe. So let me very quickly introduce Dr. Shanta Datta. I'm sure most of you are aware of her and most of you know her. Some of you probably would know personally. She is the director and G-level scientist at National Institute of Cholera and Enteric Research under ICMR. She did her microbiology MD from Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. She did her PhD from Kyushu University, Fukuoka, Japan. She has demonstrated history of working in enteric diseases research for last 2.5 decades with more than 100 research articles in high impact peer-reviewed national and international journals. And definitely, she has developed skill during these last 2.5 decades in conventional microbiology, molecular microbiology, serological methods, molecular fingerprinting, AMR, etc., etc. And she had been conferred with various awards. One is by ICMR, then Indian Association of Applied Microbiology, National Academy of Medical Council, Indian Institute of Public Health Association, etc., etc. In addition to all this, she is also, as been told earlier, a researcher, and her research has resulted in 2 patents in, again, the same area related to the topic which she is going to cover today. With this brief introduction, now I very warmly welcome Dr. Datta and request her to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Very good afternoon, and thank you to Dr. Reddy and Pranav Kumar for giving me opportunity to talk in this kind of webinar, and for your, of course, for your very kind introduction. Today, the topic I will be covering is on occupational, as I was told to cover, occupational safety for healthcare worker in pandemics, experience sharing, which will include biosafety and biosecurity in a COVID lab. Now, these are the contents which I will cover during my entire session of presentation. So now to say a few words about the general guidance regarding lab safety practices during COVID-19 pandemics. The guidance is to address the general workflow safety concern of lab personnel during this pandemic. The lab should perform first the site and activity specific risk assessment, and accordingly appropriate safety measures need to be taken. So the facilities should adhere at the same time to local policies and procedure as well as government and other public health guidelines. So what are the important areas should be considered? First, we have to analyze the number of the people working in the lab, and accordingly the safe accommodation of the lab personnel should be maintained, by maintaining social distancing and then wearing mask, etc., etc. Now we have to assess the flow of personal traffic, like how the person will work in the lab, as well as the reagent flow and the other logistics flow. It should be unidirectional for staff to walk through the lab space. Then to assess procedures for cleaning and sanitizing commonly shared equipment and areas, so that it should not act as source of infection for any lab personnel. And then to review emergency communication and to change the operational plan if necessary, so that all the staff of the lab are protected from developing any kind of disease, whether it is mild or severe illness of COVID-19. Now, I think this slide shows the virus and the virus which is responsible for COVID-19. It is SARS-CoV-2, and how we are the lab. I told we are. This is the how we can diagnose at the lab the COVID-19 infection. The gold standard is real-time PCR, and the others are being used. Those are TrueNAT, CBNAT, then rapid antigen detection test. There are many such RDTs like standard Q COVID-19 antigen, ASD biosensor. This is another rapid diagnostic test. Then COVID-19 antigen lateral test device, lab care diagnostics, etc., etc. And then COVID-19 antigen respi strip. This, for doing this, BSL-2 lab is required, because the sample which will be used for antigen detection test is the oropharyngeal or the nasopharyngeal samples from suspected COVID-19 cases. Now, antibody test, it is not the test for diagnosing acute infection, but this can be tested to see whether there is any exposure of the personnel to COVID-19 infection. Now, IgG antibody test, it is used only for surveillance purpose and to see the transmission of the virus in a community. So this slide shows the lab diagnosis of COVID-19 infection in a nutshell. There are several assays available, like RT-PCR assay I have already mentioned, antigen, antibody detection, those are the assays. But this, based on the result of the assays, we can determine whether the case is in its acute stage, or it is post-exposure, or it is already recovery stage. So here this table, it gives the idea how to, looking at the lab diagnosis result, how we can determine the stage of infection in a COVID patient. So, so this is the utility laboratory assay in the natural history of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 infection. So these are the slide. This is the this graph shows the different stages in the time course of COVID-19 infection. Then this is the lab assays which are used for clinical diagnosis. Some assays are done in the lab setup like RT-PCR, but antigen also detection also should be done in a lab setup under proper safety precaution. And antibody test, it can be done at the community level, because usually antibody is tested from healthy populations, from the serum samples of healthy population, to know the extent of infection exposure in a community. So there are other lab biomarkers for COVID-19 to see the COVID-19 progression in a patient. So those are hematological markers, biochemical markers, inflammatory markers, and coagulation markers. These are very important markers. And as you know, the blood oxygen level is also another very important markers to determine whether the patient is in its mild stage or in the severe stage of its infection. So these are the hematological marker, lymphocyte count, neutrophil count, and platelet count. Among biochemical markers, these are the important ones: albumin level, creatinine, lactate dehydrogenase, cardiac troponin, B-type natriuretic peptide, and oxygen saturation, as I have already told you. Then inflammatory markers, these are also very important. Like if these markers are increased, it can be said that the patient is heading for a severe disease, like CRP level, ferritin level, procalcitonin level, and IL-6. I think all of us know that for severe disease, the case which leading for severe diseases, they have cytokine storm, and IL-6 level is one of the most important indicator which will give us some idea about the cytokine storm, and accordingly with anti-IL-6 therapeutic agent, the patient may be treated. And D-dimer is another important biomarker. The level, with this level of D-dimer, one can say whether the patient will develop some complication or not. So this is the testing centers for COVID-19 samples in India. So polymerase chain reaction, as I have said, is the confirmatory test for COVID-19 diagnosis. Initially, it started in the month of January 2020 at NIV Pune. The infection first started in China and during the last quarter of 2019. But in India, the sample start being tested since Jan 2020. At NICED, when we get the directives from ICMR, then we started our lab for testing the samples on 3rd February 2020. And during that initial period, only few labs were active for testing samples for COVID-19, for determining COVID-19 infections. To name few, there were altogether only 13 VRDLs, including NIV Pune, NICED, other VRDLs, NCDC New Delhi, so on so forth. But now, on 11th of August 2020, lot number of lab, those have been approved by ICMR to do the COVID-19 testing, so that number of samples testing can be increased. And now on 11th August, it stands 944 government labs are operational, with private labs 477. Altogether, almost 1450 labs are involved for testing COVID-19 infection. Now coming to the biosafety and biosecurity. Being the lab personnel, we have some idea about biosafety and biosecurity, particularly for the lab personnel. So what is that? The definition of biosafety is the application of safety principles to a lab in which biological organisms, materials are handled so that the workers and the lab environment are protected. What is the objective of maintaining biosafety in a lab? To reduce or eliminate accidental exposure of workers or release potentially hazardous agents in the environment. So we have to be very cautious to save ourselves as well as to save the environment. The strategy is implement various degrees of lab containment or safety measures for managing infectious materials in a lab setting, following proper guidelines. Now, this usually depends on most important 3 principles. You have to maintain good lab practice and techniques, which include using SOPs, then training, frequent training, and to generate awareness among the lab personnel about the safety measures. Now, all the equipment should be kept in the safe condition so that repeated sanitization is required. Use of biological safety cabinet is important, and the personal protective equipment should be in plenty for use of lab personnel. Now, facility design and construction, as I have told in the beginning, that appropriate workflow is very important to reduce the spread of infectious material. So unidirectional workflow needs to be maintained, and controlled airflow is very much important if it can be maintained to reduce the transmission of infectious agents like SARS-CoV-2 virus. So usually negative pressure lab is recommended. Now coming to biosecurity. Now there is a difference between biosafety and biosecurity. Biosafety is the measures which need to be taken to save ourselves as well as the environment. But security, it means a little more than biosafety. It means the security of the environment, total population, and to the economy. So what is the definition? The discipline, this address the security of microbial agents and toxins to to reduce or eliminate the threats posed to total population, to human and animal health, environment and economy by deliberate misuse or release of the infectious agents. The objective is to protect biological agents against theft and sabotage. We all know about the biological warfare, like sabotaging the infectious material to infect a whole lot of population, so that the population, the naive population, will get infected with that infectious material, and there will be severe damage to the entire population. Now, what is the strategy? So we have to implement graded level of protection based on risk management methodology. The entire lab area should be planned as a secure area, and there should be restricted entry. There should not be any unauthorized entry. Then the whole lab should be securely locked when it is not occupied by any of the designated lab personnel. And the security surveillance system also should be installed, like with a fingerprint of the lab personnel. Only those who are authorized, they can enter the lab. And if possible, the security guard also can be kept.
Now we have a poll here, so you can. I have just switched on the poll, so you can respond poll. Looking at the just below the slides, you can see the space where the polls are there, and we are getting the response already. So another 10 seconds for those of you who want to respond. As expected, the response is same for everybody, 100% SARS-CoV-2. The COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by SARS-CoV-2. Thank you, ma'am. You can move to the next.
Now, what are the principles? Like for biosecurity, as I said, it is a more complex entity than biosafety. So several principles we need to follow. Those include physical security, personal security, then information security, transport security, and material control or accountability. So we have to develop a program management which include all the security aspect to make the biosecurity of a lab at the level of that level, so that it should not hamper the population per se, or any other area which can have the threat of biosecurity. Now, what are the highlights for COVID-19 lab safety? All procedures must be performed based on risk assessment and only by personnel with demonstrated capability. Like they should have proper training and they are capable of doing that test in a strict observance of any relevant protocol at all times. Initial processing before inactivation of all specimens, the sample should be handled in a proper biological safety cabinet, or it is also known as primary containment area, and after inactivation of the virus, that can be handled as other ordinary samples. But for any non-propagative diagnostic lab work like sequencing, the nucleic acid amplification test and facility should be used is biosafety level 2 facility. And for any other propagative lab work, like for virus culture, for neutralization test, or for isolation of virus, BSL-3 lab should be used for handling SARS-CoV-2 virus. This already I have told. Now, what are the appropriate disinfectants which can be used for this enveloped virus? So as it is true for other enveloped virus, all those disinfectants can also be used for SARS-CoV-2 virus, like hypochlorite 0.1% as surface disinfectant and 1% for any discard or bio-waste objects. And then 70% alcohol can also be used, 0.5% hydrogen peroxide, quaternary ammonium compounds or phenolic compounds, 20% Lysol. 20 minutes contact time is essential for getting rid of the virus of those objects. Now, often we need to transfer the samples from the COVID-19 patients to the designated lab where the testing will be carried out. So there is a process by which the samples, because this is highly infectious samples, so samples can be transported using biological substance category B. This is also known as UN 3373. These are the international code. So this is also triple layered packing material need to be used for transporting the samples from COVID-19 known patients. So inside the sample should be kept, then outside watertight secondary packing will be there, and then there should be some packaging material and complete outside the rigid outer packaging should be used. So this makes 3-layered packaging by which this infectious material can be transported. But for transporting of some viral culture or isolates, it should be transported as category A, infectious substance affecting humans. So the code used is UN 2814. So what are the COVID-19 RT-PCR lab requirements? There should be one BSL, this should be a BSL-2 level lab, which will include molecular biology setup for viral diagnosis. The biosafety cabinet can be used of 2A or 2B type. The cold centrifuge and microfuge is required for RNA extraction. Then a well-calibrated real-time PCR machine should be there. Staff with good understanding and good training for handling respiratory samples for viral diagnosis should be included, and they should have a clear knowledge of how to handle the samples, how to extract RNA from the samples, and how to go ahead for real-time PCR. The experienced staff is always desirable. Then robust institutional policy need to be maintained, and it should be implemented for biomedical waste management, and well-defined arrangement should be in place for segregation and discarding of biomedical waste, because biomedical waste is a very important component for transmitting the virus. So this is this table shows the different biosafety levels and what are the criteria which should fulfill to become biosafety level 1, 2, 2+, and 3. As I said, for COVID-19, biosafety level 2+ is most important. And if you handle the virus or isolate the virus or cell culture of the virus, then it should be done in biosafety level 3. So the biosafety level 2 lab, there should be restricted access, and the biohazard sign should be at the entry point. The lab coat should be worn by all the lab personnel. The coat should be either fastened on the side or back, not on the front, and gloves should be worn for contact or potential contact with infectious material. The good lab practice should be maintained. Hands should be washed after handling infectious material before leaving the lab. Drinking, eating, smoking, it should not be allowed inside the lab. This should be prohibited inside the lab. These are the basics of BSL-2 lab. There should not be any mouth pipetting for any material transfer. The lab bench should be cleaned with proper disinfectant after completion of the work. There should be clear protocol which should be displayed, which need to be displayed for visual display on the lab, in the lab, in common place, as well as in toiletries. the clear protocol on cleaning, decontamination, and dealing with spillage of potentially infected material. The potentially infected material, if it is spilled, then it should be proper precaution needs to be taken, and infected material, when it is disposed of, before that it should be autoclaved or incinerated, and after that it should be disposed of. Now there is very important component of how to design a lab. So any lab, we can use it for COVID-19 testing, but there is a standard designing of the lab for doing such testing. So medical diagnostics labs, we have the mandate, we should produce accurate and reliable report. The productivity should be managed in such a way so that the productivity should not be dampened down, and at the same time the workers, the environment, and the entire community should be protected. The sample path, reagent path, report path, as well as the lab personnel path should be unidirectional. It should incorporate the requisite aspect of intramural and extramural communications like telephone, internet, intranet, LAN. It should be there so that those can be used, which minimizes the personal contact. Then fire and emergency exits should be there, all leading to open space outside. There should be fire alarm and fighting tools, so if any lab personnel is in danger, he can communicate with the with outside.
The next poll question here, and I'm starting the poll. Last time people could not see that, all of people, so just see below the slides, you will be able to see the poll option. I see some people are responding in chat box, so better you use the poll option given in the system itself, just below the slide in mobile. If you are logged in computer, right side of the slides, you can see the poll option, and we are getting the answer. Answer is almost uniform, if not 100%. Another 10-second time. I see many people still responding in the chat box. Please respond using the poll option in the system itself so that it can be counted in the result. Okay, so I'm ending the poll now, and the response is by and large 98% PT-PCR test. Yes, madam, you can move now. Next slide. Yeah.
This is the workflow in a lab which is handling the COVID-19 infectious material. So there should be three areas: pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. So first, the lab area should start with specimen collection from either hospital ward or outpatient department. Now the sample should need to be transferred to the lab by triple layer packaging, as it was shown earlier. Now in the lab, a place should be designated for unpacking of the specimen, and that room should be, because the specimen in the VTM or viral transport media, it has potential for transmission of the virus, so it should be in biosafety level 2 lab. Then this should be allocated from the VTM. The media needs to be allocated in the sterile microcentrifuge tube, and lysis buffer need to be added to lyse the virus material. After addition of lysis buffer, then the media becomes non-infectious, and then it can be used for RNA extraction followed by PCR. Then when the result comes, then we need to analyze or interpret the result. Then all together, usually the PCR is done at least 24 or multiples of 24. So data need to be managed, and reporting, we report accordingly. Then whatever positive or all positive samples and 10% of the negative samples from the VTM should be stored for future activity like validation purpose, there are certain uses for these samples, like reconfirmation of the sample, then for validation purpose, or any other for any research activity. So in our lab, I'll show some photographs how we do these different activities in our lab. So this is a biosafety level 2 lab. Here, this lab personnel is handling the samples. So this is the most contaminated room of the lab. So adequate personal protective equipment need to be in place on. And biosafety cabinets, this is the biosafety cabinet 2A. This is required for opening the package from the second layer or the inner layer of the packing material. All leakage or spillage of primary specimen container should be discarded following appropriate spill management guideline. Here, the RNA after the sample in VTM, when it is added with lysis buffer, then it comes to another area of the lab where RNA extraction is taken place. So here again, the lab personnel should wear the PPE, and this can be aliquoted and neutralized by addition of viral lysis buffer, and then the RNA extraction can be started. This lysis buffer and other reagents, it should be handled very carefully, and this lysis buffer is usually prepared in the lab. Freshly prepared buffers are used, and it should be handled because of their corrosive in nature. This is the real-time PCR area in our lab. After the RNA has been extracted, it becomes totally non-infectious, and now BSL-2 plus area is not required, but still it is better to use unidirectional flow for reagent preparation, sample preparation, and product detection area. Then dedicated PPE and instruments should be used, and move these these are on use, those should not be moved out of the area they have been designated to be in place. Then minimize the handling of PCR amplicons. Then there is chance of like PCR amplicons, there may be chance of spread of the amplified DNA, giving rise to false positive reaction. So one should be very careful for post PCR handling of the PCR tube. Then the stored reagents, the reagents should be stored in small volume aliquots, so that if it is contaminated with DNA, then it can be discarded in that small volume. This is one area which is used in our lab for serology purpose. This also can be a source of infectious aerosols or droplet. Like as antigen detection test, it is the same samples are being used, so it should be done again in biosafety level cabinet 2 lab. But for handling of specimens for antibody test, the ELISA can be ELISA can also be done inside a biosafety cabinet. Then handle ELISA plates with gloves at all times and consider them to be contaminated. Then disinfect ELISA plates washer with immediate area every day after work to reduce the chance of contamination or spread of infection. Use aerosol containment covers over plate washers to minimize aerosol contamination. Then COVID antigen antibody testing, if it is done by ELISA, that I'll say briefly about the principles of testing. So detection of SARS-CoV-2 specific antibodies, it indicates, as I have told already, it does not indicate the infection, but it indicates exposure to the infection or immunity. But there is a doubt in saying that it can indicate immunity, because the nature of the antibody, if it protects from the infection, then only we can say the antibody has given immunity to that virus. Then when these antibodies are available in any individual, then we can confirm that the individual is in its late stage of disease, when we can expect the individual will be RNA negative. Then serological assays are usually based on, can be tested by rapid diagnostic test, ELISA or chemiluminescence assay. So where the antibody IgM or IgG can be detected against spike protein, receptor binding domain protein, or N protein of SARS-CoV-2 virus. These are usually simple and cost effective. It is not as costly as RT-PCR, and so it can be done in a moderately equipped lab. Then plaque reduction neutralization test is another assay which is very important to see whether the antibody is neutralizing the virus, and so that the antibody can protect the individual from SARS-CoV-2 reinfection. So, but this assay should be done in BSL-3 lab facility, and it requires highly technical expertise to perform. Antibody usually starts coming within 1 to 3 weeks after infection, and it should not be used to determine whether the person can go back to the work. Even if the person develops antibody, but the nasopharyngeal testing is important for antigen detection or by RT-PCR method. If it is negative, then the person can go back to the work. But nowadays ICMR has given some guidelines which says that when a case becomes positive, after that 7 days, if there is no symptoms and there is no deterioration of any other signs, then he can be discharged from the hospital without having testing the samples for the second time. And after the patient goes back to his home, then another 7 to 14 days he can be kept in home isolation. After that, he can join to his working place. We currently don't have enough information, as I have told already, to say whether the person which has developed antibody is definitely immune or protected from reinfection. So it is better not to be ensured that if a person has antibody, he will not develop any further infection. So this is the tissue culture facility in our lab. So here the tissue culture facility should be in BSL-2 plus lab, so that there should be 2 places. One is infectious tissue culture, another is sterile tissue culture. In infectious tissue culture, all the samples can be tested to see if virus isolation need to be carried out in the facility. And sterile tissue culture, the tissue culture can be maintained without inoculation of the virus. This is the specimen storage. It should be stored at all the specimens should be stored at -70 degrees centigrade, and these sample storage are important for retesting, reconfirmation, for QC testing of any other samples, then for kit validation, and for any other research activity. There should be a dedicated storage space where all the freezers should be kept. Then proper biohazard labeling should be maintained, and there should be log sheets for each of the -70 freezer to know the exact location of any sample. This is the common places data room, where all the data entry operator, they are entering the data at the end of the test. They are all data entry operator. This is another this is our canteen, so we maintain social distancing for having this. All the lab personnel, they are having food, and here the visual displays are present regarding personal protection and to maintain the personal hygiene. So now another important area is how biomedical waste management can be done. See, this we have to maintain the Biomedical Waste Management Rule 2016 as it is amended time to time, and Central Pollution Control Board guidelines as it is implemented. separate colored code bins or bags needs to be used. So yellow colored bags are used for this, should be in double layered bag should be used. 2 bags should be used for any infectious material, for discarding any infectious material like body fluids or secretion from any COVID-19 positive patients, or any infectious infectious material from the lab. So one has to maintain the segregation of waste at source. Double layered bags needs to be used, and it should be labeled as COVID-19 waste prior to handling over to waste treatment facility. Then inner and outer surface of each of the beans container should be disinfected with 1% sodium hypochlorite, and separate record should be maintained for waste management.
We have another poll. This is the last poll to participate here. So this is just published. Please respond in the system directly. You can see the poll. Yeah, I see response is coming up. And this time the response is divided. It is not uniform, unlike the earlier one. Okay, interesting. So we'll announce the result. I will give more time here because I see very interesting pattern here. So maybe 20 more seconds to respond. Those of you who were responding in chat box, please use the system option just below your slide in mobile or the right side of the menu if you are watching in computer. Still we are getting response. Interesting, large number of people participated this time and response is very varied. So I would request Dr. Datta to comment on the response. I just published it now. All of participants can view the response now. It is 40% people says that immunity of the individual, 46% people says that post exposure to cases, 11% says chronic infection, and minority 1% said acute infection. Madam, your comment, please.
Yeah, this just now I have explained that the IgG test only says about the post exposure of COVID-19 infection. So we cannot say the individual is immune if we have IgG antibody, because we never know whether this IgG antibody is protective or not. And there are cases where repeat reinfection with COVID-19 cases have been reported. So with this, we can only say, I have already spoken that IgG antibody can only say about the exposure of the infection to a population and also about the spread of the virus.
Yes, ma'am, we can move to the next slide.
Now, quality assurance and quality control, these are two very important areas for any assessment of the lab activities. So now the ensuring the results are accurate and reliable for best possible service which will be delivered to the patients with consistency. These are important. This is important, and for that only quality assurance and quality control, these two measures are required to be carried out in each lab. The results in which healthcare workers should have confidence, then only we will get better quality assurance and better quality control. Results can be achieved effectively and efficiently. Accountability to those who provide lab service, including those who are funding the lab or the project. So each and every person of the lab should be accountable for doing the lab test and for providing the result. So quality assurance and quality control result of any lab will say us about the confidence level of the lab personnel of that specific lab. Then resources that are used in the most optimal manner. This is also one should be optimum while for using the resources. Then inter-laboratory quality control activity is also done by ICMR NICED. So there are some inter-laboratory quality control labs all over India. So the responsibility of the labs are to collect the known positive samples and known negative samples, but in the blinded manner, and to do the testing in the quality control lab, and with the testing or the results of quality control lab and from the peripheral lab, both the results we have to send to the reference lab, and the reference lab will match the results of both the labs and will give the quality control result of the peripheral lab. So all COVID-19 testing lab are tagged with quality control labs. In our state, West Bengal, NICED is the quality control lab. Samples are periodically sent from the peripheral testing labs to the assigned quality control lab for inter-laboratory comparison. Then APEX center like NIV Pune, they perform the inter-lab quality control for the state or state QC lab. As I said, we send both the results to them, and it is very important to strictly adhere to the quality control plan to ensure quality results of the testing lab. Frequent workshops and training need to be undertaken to keep the lab personnel well aware of the all the guidelines and all the measures, personal protection measures, which are very important to control the transmission of the infection. Then training from APEX lab and subsequent internal training. APEX lab training was made well at the beginning of the COVID-19 lab at NICED, and subsequent interval the trainings are also conducted. Then regular supervision of the staff at work and periodic assessment also important, whether they are following or they have forgotten, and if they are not following, then again workshops and training need to be carried out. Then I'm not going into the detail because this is very important, and I think this is who are involved in the testing of COVID-19 samples. They know how to don personal protective equipment and how to doff personal protective equipment. Hand hygiene, again, there are methods how we have to wash our hands to get rid of the virus, and this I'm not, but this is very, very important, I must say. So all the people who are involved, associated with the virus, associated with the lab detection of the virus, or those those who are going from coming to the home from outside, they should follow this hand hygiene. The duration should be 40 to 60 seconds using soap and water, and if soap and water is not available, then alcohol based hand rub can also be used, and with alcohol based hand rub or soap water for 40 to 60 seconds, one can be assured that the virus will be killed by using this method. Now, what are the emergencies one can come across in the lab? There may be some spill or splashes, like leakage of primary specimen container, then spills or splashes, then there may be power failure, fire hazards, then some lockdown or riots like that. The natural disaster like we have faced with this Amphan. So when all the power was not in place, and also the wave connection was also not in place, but we have to find out some alternate measures to continue with the testing as well as to give the feedback to the patients. So requirements of staff should not be, they should be protected from getting infected. For that, sanitization, then mobilization of standby workforce in the interim period, and there should be more shifts so that at a time many workers should not be in the lab, and like if any emergency, it should be resolved within 3 to 5 minutes. So these are the 4 primary controls. The control should be at the personal level. The control should be at the workplace practice, administrative level, and engineering level. These already I have discussed, but these are given to emphasize that these are very important for handling or for reducing, minimizing the risk exposure of the lab personnel. So in summary, we can say that all labs should perform first a site-specific and activity-specific risk assessment to identify and mitigate the risk. Now, the procedures, risk assessment and mitigation measures, it depends on what are the procedures the lab need to be performed, then identification of the hazards involved, and the process and the procedures. The competency level of the personnel who will be handling the samples and who will be performing the lab test, the lab equipments and the facilities which are available in the lab, the resources available in the lab. We need to follow the standard procedure while handling clinical specimens which may contain potentially infectious material, and enough personal protective equipment should be there for use of lab personnel, and standard operating procedure need to be followed with practice and procedures for decontamination of decontamination of work surface and management of lab waste. So thank you.
So I request people to pay attention to a 90-second video from the sponsor, and then we request Dr. Rangareddy to take some questions and answer those questions with the speakers. So just 90 seconds, and after the video, we'll also share you the slides as well. So we can go ahead with the Q&A.
Thank you very much. I think I should take this opportunity to thank all those supporting organizations, Infection Control Academy, of course, and University of Hyderabad, and our academic sponsor, Sanmed Healthcare. And thank you very much to all of them. And please do not forget to take the assessments. And now I would like to request Dr. Shanta to take a few questions. Ma'am, it was a very, very informative session, and a lot of people are appreciative, and they have some questions if you can find time. Dr. Manoranjan is asking how to disinfect the tabletop of laboratory and how to disinfect the used PPE.
For tabletop of lab, one
Yeah.
can use 70%, 60% ethyl alcohol or 70% isopropanol. So these are the two disinfecting material which can be used, by which the tabletop we can get rid of the infectious material. But the PPE, I recommend not to reuse the PPE once it is worn by any lab personnel and then it has been used for doing any lab test. It should be discarded with like autoclaving, and as biomedical waste it should be discarded after autoclaving.
Another question from Dr. Alka Singh. How to convert an already developed lab into a negative pressure lab?
It is very difficult, I must say. Recently in our center, one negative pressure lab has been created. This is just to install one very robust, highly automated and robotic machine, Cobus 8800. But I don't think you can convert any normal lab to any negative pressure lab. For negative pressure lab, you have to make a separate room. uh, Actually it is an insulated lab through which the temperature will be maintained and the negative pressure will be maintained by a negative pressure gauge which is kept outside. So if it can be done in a normal lab, it is possible. Otherwise, I will recommend to go for a separate room to make it negative pressure lab and use it.
Okay, ma'am. Next question from Rambhala Nagamani. In the sample collection area, how frequently the PPE to be changed, or it can be used till end of the collection?
How frequently, there is no hard and fast rule that after a collection of so many samples you need to change, but usually with one PPE, usually for 3 hours you can work at a stretch. After that you have to change it. And second question, I didn't get the second question.
She is asking, can it be used till end of the collection?
Like if you collect many samples, then I said for 3 hours it can be one PP can be used, but after that you need to change and again continue with your collection. So after every collection you need not change the PP.
One more question, how to upgrade an existing BSL-1 lab into BSL-2 lab? I think, it is a frequent question from a lot of people.
BSL-1 lab and BSL-2 lab, actually any general lab, it can be made BSL-2 by one biosafety cabinet to equipment. So there are equipments available in market. If you can purchase one biosafety cabinet, two equipments, 2A rather, then you can do this handling of the samples of this infectious material even with COVID-19 infection. So BSL-2 cabinet is important to make. It can be kept in any ordinary lab.
Excellent. Thank you. And probably, we have 1 more minute left. Probably we'll take one last question. That if there is a leakage of the specimen, how to deal with it? Discard or what to do?
No, immediately when there is leakage, that if it is on the floor or on the working bench, immediately some amount of that 60% ethyl alcohol or 70% isopropanol you need to pour, and if it is spilled on the person or on the garments, then immediately he or she should be away from that place, change the gloves and the personal protective equipments, and thoroughly wash our hands and face everything with soap and water. And that place, at least half an hour contact is required for the place where it has been spilled, and after that it can be wiped out with any, like after half an hour exposure the virus will be killed, and then it can be wiped as it is done in any general lab?
One probably last question, because there are so many, but I think one interesting one which is directly related to the current PCR lab. Should there be separate fire safety for PCR lab, even if we
Oh.
have a common fire safety for the building? That is what is the question coming
No.
from Dr.
No,
Ketan.
for not PCR lab, for any lab, there should be a separate biosafety. So even if the common biosafety is present in the building, but for any lab, there should be a separate biosafety as well as the fingerprinting authorized entry only. So these two are very important, so that the lab should remain like as it should be, and if there is any fire hazard or anything, then it can be taken care of.
Dr. Shanta, once again, thank you so much. Our gratitude from Infection Control Academy of India.
Thank you,
for
sir. Thank
taking time from your busy schedule to deliver this lecture, and also to clarify the doubts of all those people who are working in the front line. Thank you very much. And colleagues, there is an assessment and which is required in order to get the certification. Please go through the links, sanmed.live/ss1, 2, 3, etc., etc. Please ensure that you are going to complete that assessments in order to qualify for certification. And a very warm welcome to all of you for the next session. The next session is going to be taken by Dr. Saurav Maiti. You all already know him, and he is going to talk about COVID Care Center and COVID Healthcare. It is going to be equally interesting and quite enlightening. So request you all to join me again on next Tuesday, same time. Thank you very much. Have a great time and stay safe, stay live. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.